Snow came down fast in the mountains, the kind that erased footprints before you realized you were lost. Mark Halvorsen was hiking back to his truck when he saw a German shepherd standing at the edge of a ravine, half-buried and unmoving. She didn't bark. She didn't run. She just stared downward, as if guarding something the storm hadn't finished with yet. When Mark stepped closer, he saw the puppies. Small shapes scattered in the snow, silent in a way that didn't feel natural. The mother didn't rush to them. She didn't panic. She watched him instead. Mark had survived gunfire and explosions, but this stillness made his instincts hesitate. Because before he understood what was wrong, he realized the storm wasn't the real danger, and whatever had touched those puppies was still close. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. The storm had come down fast, the kind that erased tracks and swallowed sound. Mark Halvorsen had been hiking back to his truck when he saw the dog standing at the edge of the ravine, half buried in snow. A German shepherd, lean, mud frozen into her coat, her body angled not toward escape, but toward something below. She didn't bark when she saw him. She didn't run. She stepped aside. That alone made him stop. Mark followed her gaze and saw the puppies. 4 of them, small, new. One pressed close to her belly, the others scattered unevenly, as if she tried to move them and run out of time. His training kicked in before his thoughts did. Scan, assess, prioritize. One puppy twitched, another didn't. The mother watched him with a stillness he recognized. Not fear, control. The kind that comes when panic has already been burned away. He crouched, snow soaking through his knees, breath slow and deliberate. Easy, he said, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. The puppy nearest him was cold. Too cold. Mark had seen this before, in jungles, deserts, places where hesitation cost lives. He knew the math his mind was already doing, even if he didn't want to admit it. Some choices couldn't be undone, only carried. He peeled off his outer glove and pressed 2 fingers against the smallest puppy's chest. Nothing. No flutter. No resistance. Just wait. The wind howled harder, as if urging him to move on. Mark shifted to the next puppy. This one breathed shallow, uneven, like it was borrowing time it couldn't afford. He wrapped it inside his jacket without thinking, tucking it close to his body. The warmth of it startled him. Fragile. Temporary. Behind him, the mother dog stepped closer. Her nose brushed his elbow once, then withdrew. She didn't interfere. She watched. That was worse. Mark scanned the ravine again. No den. No shelter. Just churned snow and broken brush. Whatever had driven her here had already taken its toll. Flood. Landslide. Something fast. He reached for the 3rd puppy. Alive but barely. The 4th still warm, but not breathing. His jaw tightened. In another life he'd been trained to move forward, not look back. To secure what could be saved and leave the rest where they fell. That training had kept men alive. It had also followed him into sleep for years afterward. He tucked the 2nd living puppy into his jacket. 2 small bodies now pressed against his chest, faint heartbeats tapping against his ribs. The mother dog whined softly for the first time. Not for the ones he took, for the ones he didn't. The hike back to the truck felt longer than it should have. Snow thickened, visibility shrinking to breath and white. Mark kept his arms tight around his chest, adjusting his pace to keep the puppies warm without jostling them. One stirred. The other didn't. He didn't check again. Not yet. The mother dog followed close, her steps sure despite exhaustion. She never tried to take the puppies back. Never questioned his direction. That unsettled him more than resistance would have. At the truck, Mark yanked the door open and cranked the heat. He laid his jacket across the passenger seat and gently unfolded it. One puppy whimpered, thin and sharp. The other lay still, mouth slightly open. He rubbed it briskly, methodical, like he'd done before. Like muscle memory knew what to do even when hope didn't. "Come on," he muttered. Not a prayer. Command. The mother dog jumped into the truck bed without being asked, curling tight against the cab. The puppy gasped once. Mark froze. Then it breathed again. He rested his forehead briefly against the steering wheel as the storm battered the truck. Mark started the engine anyway. The cabin lights were off when he arrived. The generator silent. Mark carried the puppies inside, boots leaving wet prints across the floor. The air smelled of cold pine and metal. He set them near the fireplace and worked one-handed to get the fire going. The mother dog stood in the doorway, snow melting off her fur in dark streaks. She didn't enter. She waited. The weaker puppy faded again. Breathing slowed. Chest barely moved. Mark wrapped it in a towel and pressed it against his skin, sitting on the floor as the fire caught. Images surfaced without warning. A medic's hands. A voice saying, "You did what you could." He hated that sentence. "Stay," he whispered. "Just stay." The fire crackled. Warmth crept into the room. The mother dog finally stepped inside and lay across the threshold, body blocking the cold, eyes fixed on Mark. Not accusing, not grateful, expectant. The puppy shuddered, then drew a deeper breath. Then another. Mark closed his eyes briefly. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something had shifted, and he knew whatever was wrong with those puppies hadn't ended in the ravine. By morning, the storm had loosened its grip, but the cold lingered like a threat that hadn't finished speaking. Mark hadn't slept. He sat on the floor beside the fireplace, back against the couch, the puppies cradled in a box lined with towels. One breathed steadily now. The other did not. The mother dog hadn't moved all night. She lay across the doorway, head on her paws, eyes open. Every time Mark shifted, her ears twitched. Not anxious, aware. At dawn, he checked the weaker puppy again. His chest barely rose. His mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Mark stood, joints stiff, and searched his cabinets. Powdered milk. An old syringe from a first aid kit. He mixed carefully, hands steady despite the quiet pressure building in his chest. He fed a few drops into the puppy's mouth. Most spilled out. The mother dog stood then. Slowly, she approached, sniffed the puppy, and nudged it once with her nose. Gentle, final. Mark swallowed hard. "I know," he said quietly, though he didn't know who he was answering. The puppy's breathing stopped minutes later. No drama, no struggle, just absence. The mother dog lowered her head and stayed still. Mark wrapped the tiny body in a cloth and set it aside. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, something heavier settled. He buried the puppy near the tree line, where the snow was thinner and the ground softer than it looked. The mother dog followed him, stopping a few feet back. She watched without sound as he finished, her breath fogging the air in slow, measured clouds. When it was done, she turned away first. Back inside, the surviving puppy whimpered, louder now, sharper. Hunger, life insisting on itself. Mark fed it again, more carefully this time, pacing the drops. The puppy latched weakly, then stronger. His tiny body warmed in his hands. Relief came, but it didn't feel clean. As the day wore on, Mark noticed things he hadn't before. The mother dog's flanks were too thin, her movements stiff. When she lay down, she favored one side. He ran his hand gently along her ribs and felt it. Heat where there shouldn't be any. Infection. The realization hit him harder than the loss. This wasn't just exposure. It wasn't bad luck or weather. Something had already been wrong before the storm. That night, as the fire burned low, the mother dog finally rested her head against his knee. Not asking, allowing. Mark stared into the flames, understanding settling in with quiet certainty. If he didn't figure this out soon, the storm wouldn't be what finished them. The vet clinic was an hour away on clear roads. The roads were not clear. Mark tried anyway. He loaded the mother dog into the back of the truck with the puppy secured in a crate beside her. She didn't resist. She didn't look back at the cabin. Just climbed in and waited. Halfway down the mountain, the road vanished under ice. The truck slid, tires fighting for purchase, before Mark eased it to a stop. He sat there a long moment, engine idling, knuckles white on the wheel. Going forward wasn't an option. Going back felt like failure. He turned around. At the cabin, he set up a makeshift space near the fire. Clean towels, warm water, antibiotics left over from a long-ago injury, expired but all he had. He hesitated before using them, then remembered how hesitation had cost him before. The mother dog lay still as he cleaned a wound he hadn't seen at first. A deep gash along her abdomen, partially healed, angry and red beneath matted fur. She flinched once, didn't pull away. Mark worked slowly, speaking only when necessary. Almost done. I've got you. Whether it was for her or for himself, he didn't know. The puppy slept, rising and falling. For now, they were still here. The fever broke near midnight. Mark noticed it when the mother dog shifted closer to the fire, then sighed. A long, easing breath that loosened something in his own chest. Her eyes met his briefly before closing again, trust settling where vigilance had lived. He sat back, exhausted, hands smelling of antiseptic and smoke. That was when he heard it. A sound beneath the cabin. Faint, scratching. Mark froze. The mother dog's head lifted instantly, ears sharp, body tensing despite her weakness. She struggled to stand, pain flashing across her face. "No," Mark said softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Stay." He grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The beam cut through the dark beneath the porch. Another dog, smaller, younger, limping. It backed away when the light hit it, then stopped, eyes reflecting white. A low whine escaped its throat. Mark understood then. This wasn't one mother's problem. It was something spreading. He crouched slowly, heart sinking as the pieces aligned. Same ribs showing, same stiffness, same silent endurance. Behind him, the cabin door creaked open. The mother dog stood there watching the newcomer, not with anger, with recognition, and Mark realized the truth had been waiting longer than he had. The second dog stayed just beyond the porch light. It hovered at the edge of the clearing, ribs sharp beneath its coat, one hind leg barely touching the ground. Snow clung to its muzzle where it had been digging, searching for something that wasn't there anymore. Mark lowered the flashlight and crouched. He didn't reach out. "Easy," he said. His voice sounded rough and used. The dog's eyes shifted past him, toward the open cabin door, toward the warmth, toward the mother dog standing there, framed by firelight. The mother didn't move. She didn't step forward or retreat. She simply watched. That was enough. The younger dog limped closer, one careful step at a time, until it reached the porch. Then it collapsed, chest heaving. Mark could see the signs clearly now. Fever, infection, the same hollowed look. He brought water first. The dog drank too fast, then retched, folding in on itself. Mark waited, one hand hovering, not forcing comfort where it wasn't wanted. When he guided the dog inside, the mother shifted just enough to make room. No greeting, just space. The puppy stirred in its crate. Mark closed the door and leaned back against it. This wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern, and patterns meant responsibility. By morning, Mark had counted 3 sets of tracks around the cabin. None fresh, all leading away. He followed them as far as the terrain allowed, past frozen brush and broken fencing, until they disappeared near an old service road. The snow there was trampled and darkened, as if bodies had passed through in panic. He stood there longer than necessary. It reminded him of places emptied too quickly, doors left open, silence doing the talking. Back at the cabin, the second dog lay curled near the fire, shivering less now. The mother dog watched him closely, her gaze sharper than before. Mark radioed for help. The signal broke apart, but enough went through. Symptoms, injuries, numbers he still couldn't confirm. There was a pause on the other end. "Sounds like poisoning," the dispatcher said. "Possibly antifreeze. Or bait." Mark closed his eyes. Someone had left something out there. Quiet. Effective. Help would come when roads cleared. Mark set the radio down and looked at the dogs. Waiting had never been his strength. Walking away wasn't either. The second dog worsened before noon. Its breathing turned ragged, body trembling despite the heat. Mark did what he could: fluids, warmth, steady pressure, but the signs were clear. Whatever it had ingested was already winning. The mother dog rose and crossed the room, ignoring her own pain. She stood over the younger dog and lowered her head until their foreheads touched. She stayed there, unmoving. Mark watched, chest tight. He'd seen this before. Not fixing, just staying. When the dog's breathing slowed, Mark knelt beside them. He didn't speak. He didn't interfere. The mother exhaled once and stepped back. It ended quietly. Afterward, she returned to the crate and curled around the puppy, drawing a line the world had already crossed too many times. Mark wrapped the body and carried it outside. The ground resisted him more this time. As he dug, anger surfaced, not loud, not wild. Focused. This wasn't weather. It was a choice, and Mark knew what it meant to live with one. The rescue team arrived late that evening. 2 trucks. Quiet voices. Serious faces. They took samples. Asked questions. Mark answered without embellishment. He watched as they examined the area near the service road, marking spots, photographing disturbed snow. "It's deliberate," one of them said finally. "We've seen it before." Mark nodded once. They offered to take the mother dog and the puppy immediately. Safer facilities. Proper care. Mark looked at the mother dog. She met his gaze, steady as ever. "She won't leave the pup," he said. "Not yet." The team agreed to return at first light. That night, the cabin felt smaller. He sat on the floor again, back against the wall, listening to the fire and the puppy's breathing. The mother dog rested with one eye open. Mark thought about doors, about how easy it was to keep them shut, about how much harder it was to live with what stayed outside. When the puppy whimpered, he reached out instinctively. The mother dog didn't stop him. She shifted closer instead. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying away tracks, erasing signs. But inside the cabin, the truth remained, and Mark knew the hardest part was still ahead. Morning arrived, gray and thin, light filtering through the trees like it wasn't sure it belonged yet. Mark stepped outside before the cabin woke, breath fogging as he scanned the clearing. The rescue trucks hadn't returned. The road was still locked in ice. He followed the service road again, farther this time. Past the bend where the tracks vanished, he found it. Plastic container, half buried. Sweet smell even through the cold. Bright green residue staining the snow. Antifreeze. Mark stood still, hands clenched at his sides. He remembered briefing rooms, rules of engagement, how intent mattered more than outcome. Whoever left this hadn't needed to see the damage to know what it would do. Back at the cabin, the mother dog stirred as he entered. She watched his face closely now, as if reading something new there. The puppy was weaker again. Not failing, but fragile. Mark fed it slowly, every movement deliberate. He felt the weight of time pressing in, not urgent, but relentless. When the rescue team finally arrived, they moved faster. The evidence changed things. Voices sharpened. Radios crackled. They prepared the mother dog for transport. She resisted for the first time, standing firm beside the crate. Mark knelt. "I'm coming," he said quietly. She studied him, then stepped inside. The door closed. Something in Mark's chest did too. The rescue facility was clean, warm, efficient. Too bright. Mark stood back as the staff worked, gloved hands moving with practiced calm. For lines, blood draws, quiet murmurs between professionals who had learned to keep hope measured. The mother dog never took her eyes off the puppy. Mark noticed how she positioned herself, always between the puppy and the room, always alert, even when sedated. Protection as instinct, not choice. A young technician approached him with paperwork. Questions about location, timing, anything he'd noticed. Mark answered, gaze fixed on the kennel. "You military?" she asked gently. "Used to be." She nodded, understanding more than she said. Hours passed. The vet finally approached, expression careful. "The puppy's affected," she said. "But you got it out early. That matters." Mark exhaled slowly. "And the mother?" "She's strong," the vet replied. "Stronger than she looks." That night, Mark slept in a chair beside the kennel. The room hummed softly, machines breathing for those who couldn't yet. He dreamed lightly, fractured images, snow, doors, hands letting go too late. When he woke, the mother dog was watching him through the bars. Not guarded, present. The investigation moved quietly. No press, no announcements, just questions asked along back roads and at worn kitchen tables. Mark answered when needed, then stepped aside. He spent his days at the facility helping where he could, cleaning, carrying supplies, sitting with animals that didn't like being alone. It felt familiar, useful without being loud. The puppy improved in small ways. Stronger latch, longer wakeful moments. The kind of progress that only showed itself if you stayed long enough to notice. One afternoon, the mother dog surprised everyone. She stepped away from the puppy, just a few feet, then sat. Mark noticed first. He didn't move. Neither did she. Minutes passed. The puppy slept on. The mother dog looked at Mark, then back at the puppy. She lay down, but not as close as before. The vet whispered, "That's a good sign." Mark nodded, though his throat tightened. Letting go had never meant abandoning. It meant trusting something else to hold. That night, the mother dog slept deeply for the first time. Mark sat nearby, hands folded, realizing how much of his own life had been spent standing watch long after the threat had passed. Some habits saved lives. Others needed to be released. The investigation moved quietly. No press, no announcements, just questions asked along back roads and at worn kitchen tables. Mark answered when needed, then stepped aside. He spent his days at the facility helping where he could, cleaning, carrying supplies, sitting with animals that didn't like being alone. It felt familiar, useful without being loud. The puppy improved in small ways. Stronger latch, longer wakeful moments. The kind of progress that only showed itself if you stayed long enough to notice. One afternoon, the mother dog surprised everyone. She stepped away from the puppy, just a few feet, then sat. Mark noticed first. He didn't move. Neither did she. Minutes passed. The puppy slept on. The mother dog looked at Mark, then back at the puppy. She lay down, but not as close as before. The vet whispered, "That's a good sign." Mark nodded, though his throat tightened. Letting go had never meant abandoning. It meant trusting something else to hold. That night, the mother dog slept deeply for the first time. Mark sat nearby, hands folded, realizing how much of his own life had been spent standing watch long after the threat had passed. Some habits saved lives. Others needed to be released. Spring didn't arrive all at once. It crept in through softened snowbanks and longer afternoons, through the quiet return of birds Mark hadn't heard in years. The cabin breathed differently now. Windows open, air moving. The mother dog settled into the rhythm first. She chose the porch as her post, watching the tree line with calm authority. Not guarding, observing. The kind of watch that trusted the world but stayed ready. The puppy grew stronger each day. Awkward legs, curious nose. It followed Mark everywhere, tripping over boots, chewing laces, sleeping hard after short bursts of chaos. Life, uncontained. Mark found himself adjusting without thinking. Meals planned, walks timed, a hand always ready to steady something small. One evening, as the sun dropped behind the ridge, he noticed the puppy pawing at the threshold. The door stood open, the line between inside and out blurred by light. The puppy hesitated, then stepped forward. The mother watched but didn't intervene. Mark stayed still. The puppy crossed, sniffed the porch, then turned back, tail wagging uncertainly, as if checking whether it was allowed to belong in both places. Mark smiled. He realized then the danger had never been the storm or the poison alone. It had been the temptation to close the door again. The investigation ended quietly. A man from a nearby property. Carelessness framed as malice. Consequences followed, but Mark didn't linger on them. Justice didn't always need witnesses. The rescue center checked in less often now. The puppy no longer needed monitoring. The mother dog no longer scanned every sound. One afternoon, Mark sat on the steps carving a small wooden tag. He worked slowly, deliberately. When he finished, he tied it to the puppy's collar. "River," he said aloud. The puppy barked once, sharp and proud. The mother lifted her head at the name, then rested it again. That night, Mark dreamed without noise. No sudden waking. No reaching for things that weren't there. In the morning, he woke to weight against his leg. River asleep. The mother nearby, eyes closed. Mark sat there longer than necessary, listening to breathing that didn't demand vigilance. Later, Eleanor from down the mountain stopped by with bread and quiet conversation. She didn't ask questions. She never had. "You stayed," she said, noticing the dogs. Mark nodded. "So did they." She smiled. "That's how it usually works." After she left, Mark stood in the doorway, watching the road disappear into trees. For once, he didn't feel pulled to follow it. Summer came full and loud. River grew fast, strength replacing clumsiness. The mother dog taught without force, corrections brief, lessons clear. Mark watched, learning something he hadn't known he'd forgotten. Protection didn't mean control. It meant presence. One afternoon, a storm rolled in suddenly. Thunder cracked close. Rain slammed the roof. River panicked, scrambling toward the door. The mother stood, blocking the exit, steady as stone. She waited. Mark knelt beside River, hand firm on its chest. "It's okay," he said, not to convince, just to be there. The thunder passed. River leaned into him, breathing slowing. Later, as the rain eased, Mark realized his hands weren't shaking. That night, he sat on the porch with both dogs at his feet. Fireflies blinked in the dark. The forest hummed. He thought about the ravine, the silence, the choice. He hadn't saved everyone, but he hadn't turned away. The mother dog rested her head on his boot. River sprawled across his lap, too big now, too heavy. Mark laughed quietly. The sound felt earned. The first snow returned a year later, light and unthreatening. Mark stood at the window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching flakes settle where footprints had once vanished too quickly. River bounded outside, thrilled. The mother followed at a measured pace, confident, unafraid. Mark opened the door and stepped onto the porch. No hesitation. The cold touched his face, clean and honest. He breathed it in. Behind him, the cabin glowed warm. Ahead, the world waited. Mark didn't think about storms anymore as things to survive. He thought of them as moments that revealed what stayed when everything else was stripped away. The dogs circled back to him, snow dusting their fur. Mark knelt, one hand on each of them. "Let's go home," he said. And for the first time, the words didn't feel like retreat. They felt like arrival. Some doors change everything when we choose to open them. If the story stayed with you, let it stay a little longer. Press the like button, subscribe and bell icon if you want more stories like this. And tell us in the comments what this one meant to you, or where you're watching from.